The year that this video was made is 2018. The fact is interesting in itself, because if you think about it, the Gregorian calendar which tells us that we're in 2018 is not even 500 years old. Now, I know that's an odd way of starting a video, but if I haven't lost your attention already, then please hold on for just a moment longer, because I'm about to share something amazing with you that will blow your mind. Interested? Okay, here goes. Before I get to that amazing stuff, some background information. We used the 365-day Gregorian calendar. Before that, they had the Julian calendar, the Old Persian calendar, the Mayan calendar, etc. And after intensive study, I have come to the same conclusion, as many scholars have, that in the first centuries in recorded history, which goes back about 4th millennium BC, they used a 360-day calendar. So, here's an illustration of these two calendar timelines. Here's our current calendar, and here's an ancient 360-day calendar. Now, allow me to make my first point. When we say that we are in the year 2018 in the Gregorian calendar, if we would go by a 360-day calendar, that would put us approximately in the year 2045 AD. We will pick up on this calendar thing again in a moment, but let's just make sure that we've got the facts right about the 360-day calendar. So, if we look at some famous ancient books, we can gather a bit more information about this 360-day year. The first book that we will look at is the book of Genesis in the Bible, or Breshit in the Tanakh, chapter 7, 24, which states that during Noah's flood, the water prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Earlier in the same chapter, in verse 11, it states, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on this day, all the springs of the great deep were split, and the windows of the heavens opened up." In the following chapter, it states in verse 4 that, "And the ark came to rest in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat." So, if it starts in the 17th of the 2nd month, and it ends on the 17th of the 7th month, then that is 5 months. And if it also states that the duration was 150 days, then that would be 150 divided by 5, which is 30 days per month. So if a year is 12 months, then 12 times 30 equals 360 days in a year. So there is a case for a 360-day year. Okay, this is getting too much math already. So let's just point out that there's another example in Revelation 11, verse 2 to 3, where it states directly that 42 months equals 1,260 days. So, in this book, the year is clearly 360 days. But I'm repeating myself. So, let's go to our second point, which involves history and prophecy. I've got 3 examples of fulfilled prophecy, and I will try to make them as short as possible. But it is the third prophecy which is the one that is going to blow your mind. So hopefully you can stick around for some more minutes. Let's look again into the Bible for a prophecy that was written about 640 BC in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 25, verse 11. "And all this land shall become waste and desolation, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. And further, Jeremiah states in chapter 29, 10, that, "For so said the Lord, for at least the completion of 70 years of Babylon, I will remember you, and I will fulfill my good word toward you, to restore you to this place." Now, maybe you've heard the story of Daniel and his friends who were captured and sent to Babylon. You know, the one who didn't want to eat the king's food, and the one who was put in the den of lions. There were 3 distinct invasions, and the invasion in which Daniel was captured in was the first one in 607 BC. So, the prophecy was written 30 years before Babylon invaded and destroyed their land. Actually, it wasn't until the third invasion in 587 BC that the temple and walls were destroyed. But it all started in 607 BC with the first invasion. As we'd expect, 70 years later, the first company returned under Zerubbabel in 537 BC. In the second example, we will have to use our calendar conversions that we saw earlier, because of the lengthy period between the prophecy and the fulfillment, so this will take a little longer to explain. But first, what did the prophecy say? Let's look again into the Bible in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 24 to 26. 70 weeks of years have been decreed upon your people and upon the city of your sanctuary to terminate the transgression, and to end sin, and to expiate iniquity, and to bring eternal righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophet, and to anoint the Holy of Holies. And you shall know and understand that from the emergence of the word to restore and to build Jerusalem until the anointed king shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will return and be built street and moat, but in troubled times. And after the 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off, and he will be no more. Now that was a long one. What was being said here? We see the 70 week being divided into 2 periods of time of 69 weeks, with 1 week left over. So 7 weeks of years equals 49 years, and 62 weeks of years equals 434 years. So in total we have 483 years, and these years start at the emergence of the word to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem. But do we have any record of when this was? Yes, we do. In Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 1, we read, "Now it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes." This is the place where we read about Nehemiah getting the king's permission to go back home to rebuild the temple and the wall of Jerusalem. But can we find out when this was? Well, thanks to recorded history, encyclopedias state that Artaxerxes reigned from year 465 BC. His 20th year must have then started in 446 BC, and the month of Nisan of his 20th year then was probably around March-April in 445 BC. So we can conclude that the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem was in March-April 445 BC. Now, it's math time again. Because they didn't use our calendar, remember, it wasn't invented yet, so starting in March and calculating 483 years forward, we must remember that these years are 360-day years. So, let's first convert them to days. 483 times 360 equals 173,880 days. Now, let's see how long this would be in our calendar. 173,880 divided by 365.25 days equals 476 years with 21 days left over. Now, let's add these years to the approximate known date. March 445 BC plus 476 years equals March of the year 31 AD. Now, when we go from BC to AD, we must add a year, because the year 0 doesn't count. There wasn't one. So now we're in March of the year 32 AD. Finally, let's add 21 days, which will put us back at the time of Passover Easter in the year 32 AD. And, as the prophecy stated, and after the 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off, and he will be no more. Now, doesn't this sound like the crucifixion of the anointed one, Jesus Christ, which according to history happened at this time? But now it gets even more interesting, because now we're going to look at something more recent. We find the third prophecy in 2 places in the Bible, but for the sake of time, we will look only at Ezekiel's prophecy, which we find in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 4, verses 4 to 6, which states, "And you shall lie on your left side, and you shall place the iniquity of the house of Israel through it. The number of the days that you shall lie on it, you will bear their iniquity. Now I have given you the years of their iniquity, by the number of days, 390 days. And you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And when you complete these, you shall lie on your right side a second time. And you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah. 40 days, a day for a year, a day for a year. I have given it to you." So Ezekiel is performing this act for over a year, 430 days to be exact. And, as we saw, this would mean 430 years. Now, the book of Ezekiel was written about the same time as Jeremiah. So, we can assume that we can subtract 70 years from these 430 years. This would leave us with 360 years of punishment still pending. But the puzzling thing is that nothing special happened 360 years later. It seemed that Israel was still under punishment because they did not return at this point. So, what are we missing? The key is located in Leviticus, or Vayikra, chapter 26. This was stated long before, almost a millennium earlier, in 1400 BC. Here, we read the promises that God gives to the people of Israel. It states that if Israel is loyal to God's commandments, he will bless them in different ways. However, in verse 14, we read what would happen if they did not listen. And in verse 17, we read, "I will set my attention against you, and you will be smitten before your enemies. Your enemies will rule over you. You will flee, but no one will be pursuing you." Doesn't this sound like the exile that ended in 537 BC? Now, let's read a bit further, because in verse 18, we read what will happen if they, after this punishment, would still not listen. "And if, during these, you will not listen to me, I will add another 7 punishments for your sins." The statement is repeated in verses 21, 24, and 28. And if we read further, we see in verse 33, "And I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheath the sword after you. Your land will be desolate, and your cities will be laid waste." I really don't like what I read here, but nonetheless, this is the key to unlocking the mystery of Ezekiel's prophecy. The people of Israel still did not follow the commandments, so we can assume, according to Leviticus 26:33, that God scattered them among the nations, and also that the remaining punishment would be multiplied by 7. So finally, it's math time again. There are 360 years of punishment left, so 360 times 7 equals 2,520 years. Now, we must convert this to days in order to get this converted to the calendar that we know. 2,520 times 360 equals 907,200 days. Finally, let's convert this back to our 365.25 day year calendar. 907,200 divided by 365.25 days equals 2,483.78, or to be exact, 2,483 years and 284 days. So, the Babylonian captivity ended in 537 BC. And if we add 2,483 years, we come to the year of 1946. But, as there was no year 0, we have to add another year. So now we're at 1947. Finally, we have to add the remaining 284 days, or 9.5 months. We would likely end up in the year 1948. So, did God keep his promise? Yes, he did, because the Israeli Declaration of Independence was indeed proclaimed on May the 14th, 1948. Now, although the prophecies are not quite over with Israel yet, it is amazing to see that even in our time, we see Bible prophecy being fulfilled. For me, mind blown.